"Open this gate right now." Francine Drummond's words slammed into me like a freight train. She was demanding access to my private lake for 21 families from the Oakage Meadows HOA. Her tone left no room for negotiation. This wasn't a request, it was a command. But here's the twist. I didn't just say no. I said something that would change everything. What happened next? Well, it wasn't what she expected, and it sure wasn't what the HOA had in mind. Stick around because this showdown between property rights and HOA overreach is just getting started, and trust me, you won't believe how it ends. When I retired from environmental engineering 3 years ago, I sought a life of peace. I found it on 8.3 acres of land, surrounded by dense pines and a pristine, spring-fed lake. The lake, clear enough to see the rocks at the bottom 15 feet down, sat entirely within my property. I loved it for its solitude, and I made sure everything was clear in the deed. No HOA restrictions, no strings attached. The property was mine, and I was happy to keep it that way. The Oakage Meadows HOA, a subdivision of identical homes with manicured lawns, sat about 200 yards east of my property. Their bylaws and covenants had no legal claim over my land. Before purchasing, I double-checked with the county records. Everything was solid. The previous owner, a man who'd lived here for 30 years, had turned down numerous offers from the HOA to buy the land, choosing instead to keep it untouched. He handed me the keys with a smile and said, "Don't let them tell you what to do with your own land." I took his advice to heart. The HOA's world was theirs, not mine. But then Francine Drummond became HOA president, and things started to change. I'd met Francine twice at community events. She was always impeccably dressed, even on weekends. She had a way of talking that made you feel like compliance was expected, not requested. At both events, she casually mentioned the lake, saying things like, "It's such a shame it's not open to more people." I smiled politely, but changed the subject, uninterested in her vision for my land. Then one morning she showed up uninvited, parked at the end of my gravel driveway. I saw her standing at the gate, arms crossed like she owned the place. She waved me over, demanding my attention. "Keith," she started without any pleasantries, "I'm here on behalf of the Oakage Meadows HOA board. We're organizing a community event for the 4th of July and want to use your lake for a family barbecue and water activities. We're expecting 21 families." I let the silence stretch for a moment, then responded calmly. "I appreciate the interest, but the lake is private property. It's not available for community use." Her face shifted, tension rising in her expression. She wasn't used to hearing no from anyone in the neighborhood, especially not from someone who lived outside the HOA's reach. "I understand that you technically own the land," she said, emphasizing technically, as if my ownership was up for debate. "But we consider all properties in the vicinity part of the spirit of the community." I shook my head. "No, this is private property. Not part of your community." Her smile tightened, and her voice grew colder. "If you refuse, there will be consequences," she said, pulling out a piece of paper and waving it in front of me. "A formal notice of non-compliance. You'll be fined $250 for refusing to allow access." I didn't take the paper. "Your fines don't apply here. My property is outside your jurisdiction," I said firmly. Her jaw tightened, and she turned on her heel, marching back to her car. As she drove away, the gravel spraying beneath her tires, I stood there staring at the gate. Something in the way she'd said, "We'll see about that," told me this was just the beginning. 3 days passed in quiet, but the calm was deceptive. Francine wasn't done, and I could feel the pressure starting to mount. On Tuesday afternoon, I checked my mailbox and found an oversized envelope from the Oakage Meadows HOA, embossed with their gold logo. Inside was a formal letter on HOA letterhead, dated May 18, 2025, and signed by Francine herself. The letter invited me to attend a special board meeting on May 25th at 7:00 p.m. to discuss my failure to cooperate with the community's wellness initiatives. The subtext was clear. This wasn't an invitation, it was a setup. A public shaming disguised as a community meeting where I'd be painted as the villain in front of everyone. I read the letter twice before folding it and heading inside. I pulled out my deed and the official survey map of the property, spreading them out on the kitchen table. Everything was clear, my land was mine, and it wasn't part of their HOA. I called the county recorder's office to confirm the legal details, and within minutes, the clerk verified that my property had never been part of the Oakage Meadows HOA's jurisdiction. 2 business days later, I picked up the certified records from the county office. I knew I had to be ready. If Francine was going to play hardball, I'd play smarter. This wasn't about some HOA rules, it was about property rights, and I wasn't going to back down. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable. It was subtle at first, but I began noticing the whispers. At the gas station, a neighbor I barely recognized asked me about the issue with the HOA and the lake. "You planning to work things out?" he asked casually, but I could tell there was more to it. I kept my answer short. "There's no issue. My property isn't part of the HOA." A few hours later at the hardware store, another neighbor mentioned hearing about community access issues and asked if I was refusing to cooperate. Again, I didn't engage. It was clear Francine had started a quiet smear campaign trying to turn the community against me. People weren't hearing the full story, just the version she was spinning. By Friday, I knew the battle was escalating. Francine's next move came in the form of an official community meeting notice posted at the Oakage Meadows mailboxes. The announcement read, "All residents encouraged to attend." And while I wasn't a resident of the HOA, it was obvious that she was trying to rally the neighborhood against me. The following week, the pressure ramped up further. I spent my days preparing, gathering every piece of evidence I might need. I made copies of the deed, the survey, the county's records, and the email I had saved from the county recorder confirming that my land was outside HOA jurisdiction. I also researched the HOA's own bylaws. I found a key section, Article 7, Section 3, that stated any expenditure exceeding $5,000 required a board vote and written notification to members. I made a note to bring it with me in case things got really ugly. Francine wasn't just fighting to control my lake. She was using everything at her disposal to manipulate the situation. The constant pressure, the formal notices, the whispered comments, all were designed to wear me down to get me to cave in. But I wasn't about to play by her rules. I knew her tactics well. The HOA was trying to use public pressure to make me look unreasonable. But I had something she didn't legal proof that I was in the right. The day before the HOA meeting, I received another notice. This one was more formal, coming from a law office called Lakeside Legal Consultants, LLC. It was vague, only stating they'd been hired to review certain property matters related to the Oakage Meadows HOA. No specifics. No mention of the lake. But the timing was too convenient. I looked up the law firm's registration, and sure enough, it was registered by none other than Amanda Drummond, the daughter of Francine Drummond. I couldn't believe it. Francine was using her daughter's law firm to put pressure on me. This wasn't just a simple community dispute. It was a coordinated effort to force me to back down using legal threats, public pressure, and her own family's business as a weapon. I wasn't about to let her get away with it. The day of the HOA meeting arrived, and I showed up prepared. I gathered my documents, everything that proved I was in the right, and made sure to keep a copy of the certified records with me. I wasn't going to let her frame this as a simple misunderstanding. As I walked into the Oakage Meadows clubhouse, I could feel the tension in the air. More than 30 people had already gathered, and their eyes flicked toward me as I stepped into the room. Francine, sitting at the front, smiled that cold smile of hers when she saw me. But I wasn't there for a friendly chat. I walked straight to the front, placed my folder on the table in front of her, and calmly said I brought the property records in case anyone has questions about jurisdiction. Francine's smile faltered just for a moment. But she didn't expect me to come armed with facts, and it showed. The room went silent as I sat down waiting for her to make her move. The room went silent as Francine finished outlining the HOA's position. She had that same practiced, confident smile on her face, but there was an edge of tension now. I could feel it, the change in the air, as she prepared to push me into a corner. "We're here to resolve a matter that's been affecting our community," she began, her voice smooth and steady. "The lake has always been a community asset, and we believe it should remain that way. But one resident refuses to allow access." She made a pointed gesture toward me, her eyes flicking in my direction. "This attitude is causing unnecessary division, and we need to address it." I was just a few feet away from the table, watching her every move. She was spinning the story her way, painting me as the unreasonable one, when all I had done was stand my ground. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. When she finished her speech, the room was quiet for a moment. Then a man near the front raised his hand, his voice steady. "What's the legal situation here? Does the HOA actually have authority over that property?" Francine didn't miss a beat. "We consider all properties within the vicinity to fall under the spirit of the covenant," she said smoothly. "Our legal team is reviewing the situation, and we're confident a resolution can be reached soon." I stood up, cutting through the moment of silence. The eyes of the room shifted to me. "I think it's time for some clarity," I said, my voice calm but firm. I didn't wait for Francine to respond. I grabbed the folder I'd prepared earlier, the one containing the official county documents, and walked up to the front of the room. I placed the folder down in front of Francine, my eyes meeting hers. "This is a certified copy of my property deed and survey map," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "It clearly states that my land, including the lake, is not part of the Oakage Meadows HOA. There are no covenants or agreements in place between my property and your association." I could see the blood drain from Francine's face as she realized what I was holding. I didn't give her a chance to speak. Your legal team may be reviewing the matter, but the facts are clear. This property is mine, and I have every right to control what happens on it. I stood back and let the room take in what I had just presented. Francine's smile faltered as she glanced at the documents. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. A few moments of stunned silence passed before one of the board members, an older man with glasses, stood up. He walked over to the table, picked up the deed, and examined it carefully. "This is official," he muttered. "It says the property is private, no HOA jurisdiction." He looked around at the others, who were slowly beginning to murmur among themselves. The certainty that had once filled the room was gone. Doubt had crept in, and it was clear that Francine had lost her control. Her face turned an even deeper shade of red as she tried to regain composure. "This is just one interpretation," she snapped, her voice shaking now. "But the HOA has a duty to its members. We need to ensure access to community resources." I shook my head. "No, Francine. The law doesn't interpret things this way. Your HOA doesn't control my property no matter how much you'd like it to. If you try to fine me or force me to comply, I will challenge it in court, and you'll lose." She stood there for a moment, her mouth slightly open as if she were about to argue but couldn't find the words. Then the most unexpected thing happened. A younger board member, a woman sitting to Francine's left, leaned forward and spoke up. "Did we even consult a lawyer before issuing that fine notice?" The question hung in the air like a slap in the face. Francine remained silent, and the room grew quieter. The younger woman glanced at the rest of the board, and the murmur of disbelief spread. Finally, Francine's lips parted. "We're in the process of getting legal counsel," she said, her voice stiff barely above a whisper. The tone was defensive, and I could see the cracks in her confident facade. A few board members exchanged glances, clearly unsettled by her response. The energy in the room had shifted. Francine had spent the whole meeting spinning the story her way, but in that moment the truth had come out, and there was no escaping it. After the meeting, the shift in the room was undeniable. Francine no longer commanded the same unquestioning support. Her carefully constructed narrative had fallen apart, and now the truth was out in the open. The remaining board members seemed to shift uncomfortably in their seats as they processed what had just happened. I walked out of the clubhouse that night, my footsteps echoing in the quiet parking lot. The weight I had been carrying for months had finally lifted. It wasn't over yet, but I could feel the tide turning. A week passed without word from Francine, but the pressure didn't entirely fade. On June 7th, I received a letter from a law firm called Lakeside Legal Consultants, LLC. The letter was vague, a polite invitation to discuss potential options for resolution regarding the HOA's concerns. No specifics. Just an attempt to keep the pressure on. I wasn't fooled. I looked up the law firm and saw that it was newly registered with the agent listed as Amanda Drummond, Francine's daughter. It was clear what was happening. Francine was using her daughter's business to leverage the HOA's resources. This wasn't about community spirit, it was about control and personal gain. The next blow came on June 20th when I received an inspection notice from the county. Someone had anonymously filed a complaint claiming my lake was being used for commercial purposes without proper permits. I knew this was another tactic from Francine, trying to create bureaucratic obstacles to wear me down, but I was prepared. When the inspector Carl Jensen arrived, he spent only a few minutes inspecting the lake. After a quick check, he confirmed what I knew all along. There was no commercial activity here. No signs, no rentals, no fees. Just a private residential lake. The inspection was signed off, and the complaint was officially dismissed. But Francine wasn't done. I started hearing whispers from neighbors who lived closer to Oakage Meadows. At the post office, a woman mentioned safety concerns about unmonitored bodies of water. At the hardware store, a man spoke of liability issues with my lake. It was clear now Francine was running a smear campaign to turn the community against me. On June 24th, the Oakage Meadows newsletter arrived, and sure enough, it included a section about community safety concerns. It didn't mention me directly, but the implication was obvious. Francine was trying to paint me as a threat to the neighborhood's children. I wasn't going to let this go unchallenged. I wrote a letter to the HOA board and copied every resident on the mailing list, pointing out that my property was not part of the HOA, that the county had cleared the lake of any violations, and that the newsletter was spreading misinformation. I included a copy of the inspection report and made it clear that defamation wouldn't be tolerated. 2 days later, I received a call from Roger Haynes, the HOA treasurer. He was cautious, but his message was clear. "I've been reviewing the financial records," he said. "There are things that don't add up. I think you should know." Roger had discovered an $18,000 payment from the HOA to Lakeside Legal Consultants, the law firm run by Francine's daughter. There was no board vote, no member notification. This wasn't just a power grab, it was personal gain. Francine had misused HOA funds for her own benefit, and now that misconduct was coming to light. On July 8th, the HOA board called an emergency meeting to address the financial misconduct. The room was packed with over 80 residents. Roger laid out the facts, the unauthorized payment, the lack of board approval, and the violation of HOA bylaws. The room erupted in disbelief and anger as the evidence piled up. The vote was swift. Francine was suspended from the board pending a full investigation. The next day, I received a call from Roger confirming that Francine had returned the $18 0 inches restitution. But she wasn't done. She was still facing possible criminal charges for embezzlement. In the weeks that followed, things began to settle. The HOA voted to revise its bylaws, ensuring more transparency and accountability. The board elected an interim president, Alicia Morton, who promised to clean up the mess. For me, the most significant moment came when the county issued a certified affidavit confirming that my 8.3 acres, including the lake, was outside Oakage Meadows' jurisdiction. It was official. My property was mine, completely free of HOA control. A few months later, Francine and her family sold their house and left the area. The pressure was gone, and I could finally enjoy my property in peace. The lake remained tranquil, the gate stayed closed, and the only people who visited were the ones I invited. The whole ordeal had been exhausting, but it proved something standing your ground works. I had fought for my rights and had the law and documentation on my side. I wasn't just defending my lake. I was defending the principle that no one should be able to take what isn't theirs, no matter how much power they think they have. For anyone out there facing a similar fight, remember this: the system works when you stand firm, document everything, follow the rules, and never back down.